have time to ask questions.
Sounds like it's good news.
And that there's a free will office.
Yes.
And we'll sing the hymn, we'll sing a hymn first. I don't know which one, let's see.
You could alternate verses from one to the other.
That would be exciting.
There's an idea.
Okay, so I should just
You can, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
and then I'll see those announcements, and then you'll do the song, and then I'll get back up, and then we'll introduce. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do. Right time.
Yeah, right, whatever you said.
We have a group assembled we're calling a pastor too at the same time, so we're in the middle of our call process. And I think they're here meeting
They're meeting now.
tonight, so there's a group of folks right in the room next to us that'll be joining us here in a few minutes. So, yeah.
It's exciting. It's really exciting.
Second interview?
You're expecting a rush of people.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is trying to organize how they're gonna, when they're gonna actually have those and where they're gonna have them. And so they're just getting organized for that right now. So, yeah, that's very cool. A lot of commandments up there, huh?
Well, there's really only 9, because 9 and 10 are the same one.
They're pretty close, aren't they?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to have 2 for covenant.
Especially if you read the Hebrew below it there,
And that's not Hebrew.
What is that?
I think Spencer Pownell came up with that it's Phoenician, that they were doing something at school and they had Phoenician writing in it.
Is that right?
It's not Aramaic, it isn't Hebrew,
Okay.
it's obviously not Latin, some of those things. And he came up with that, so I think that probably makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure everybody's tried to figure out the,
Well, it goes right to left.
right?
You shall not.
Yeah, everything's backwards, right? And you've all figured that out during the sermon,
Oh, so many times.
And all the wedding photos that just catch the bottom 2 words in number 6 there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right.
Or if you get both,
Exactly.
you shall not kill and you shall not kill. That's pretty much sums up marriage.
Yeah, it says a lot.
Yeah, it's over.
Hi.
Amy.
Do you know if anybody else is coming from next
I think
week?
Karla was planning on being here. Are you waiting for us?
Kind of.
We just didn't know if you guys
No, I'll
were
go tell them to
part of
bring
the
up.
service.
Roundabout. Got the cattle prod.
She's running.
It's all right. Quite all right.
Mach schnell.
We'll double our audience when they come in here.
The first thing she said was, "You're waiting on us."
They'll come in and say, hey, we're bringing the TV.
We're all here.
Okay.
Come on.
Good evening, everybody. I have a few announcements to make here tonight. First of all, Pastor Rob is not going to be with us. He called a little bit ago, and he's not feeling well at all. involved. So he asked if I could step in and sort of help kick things off tonight. This is our series of Lent services where speakers are going to come in and share their story in the community. What we want to do is just try to understand how ministry has continued through COVID, and we selected some people from different areas around the community that we thought could help share their stories with us and give us some ideas of perhaps how we could help them as well with their journey and ours as well. So tonight is our first speaker. It's Karla Tenz, and she's the executive director with Porch. And before we get started on that, a couple of other announcements. We will have a free will offering tonight, and that will go tonight it will go to Porch, and subsequent offerings from Lenten services will go to the charity of that particular speaker. So let's be aware of that. So I think we're going to have 2 hymns tonight. We'll start with a hymn, and then we'll end with a hymn. And I'll introduce Karla right after the first hymn.
Okay, so we're going to do O Lord throughout these 40 days. A good Lenten hymn. All right, let's do verse 1 and verse 4.
Okay, as I mentioned, we've got Karla with us tonight, and I'm going to just share a brief bio with you about Karla, and it gives you an idea of where she's been and what she's doing. So Karla Tenz, it's her spelling is T-H-E-N-N-E-S, and I'm sure you get asked that quite a bit. So thank you for clarifying that. Karla is the executive director for Porch and holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a concentration in mental health. Karla has worked for Porch since 1991. She did her internship at the men's drop-in shelter at Grace Episcopal Church in 1990 and has worked or supervised every housing and service program managed at Porch. Karla has an extensive grant writing and program development experience. Karla received the Unsung Heroine Award given out by NAMI in 2002, and Karla is on the board of directors of Goodwill of South Central Wisconsin and Downtown Madison Incorporated, a member of United Way of Dane County's Affordable Housing Fund Committee, an active member of the Downtown Rotary. Karla has been married to her husband, Zach, for 20 years and has 3 children. Karla, you obviously have a real passion for your community and the people that you serve. And we're really, really happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. I've known Greg and Beth for several years through Lakeview Lutheran's wonderful meal ministry at the shelter for many, many years. So tonight I'm going to talk just a little bit about my journey that kind of took me into Porch Light, and we're going to talk about Porch Light services. We're going to talk a little bit about folks sleeping on the street and Rindell Park and little shelters and little homes and hotels and You'll know it all by the time you walk out of here. And then we're gonna have time for questions afterwards. So if I've left something out, you can ask questions. I'm gonna be peeking at my watch a couple times because, as my children say, I can get a little chatty, especially when I'm talking about something that I'm very passionate about. So we'll get you in and out of here. So I'm from Minnesota. I can hear my accent. I'm from Minnesota. And I came to Madison for grad school in the social work department. But when I was a senior in high school, I'm from a very small town. And by a very small town, I mean 325 people, and it's still 325 people. And our senior year in high school, we did the senior trip, right? To Washington, D.C. and New York City. And of course, with my town, we went with the four nearby towns with us to make a bus full of kids. But one day we were in Washington, D.C. I was there with several girlfriends, and for the first time, the chaperones had said that we could go downtown by ourselves without having chaperones with us. So of course, we were super excited about that, and we brought our shopping money with us. And I very clearly remember standing by this kiosk of sunglasses. And so here it's I and three other girlfriends, and we're looking at these sunglasses, and there was a gentleman about 10 feet away that, I'm assuming he was homeless. And he, walked a little bit closer to us and said, "Excuse me, I haven't had anything to eat today. Could I have $1?" And so, of course, we're 17, and the chaperones had said, don't talk to anybody, don't interact with anybody, right? We're given our one chance to do this right. So I remember us kind of slowly doing this, right, around the kiosk. And he said again, like we didn't hear him, excuse me, I haven't had anything to eat today. Could I have $1? And so we said nothing, and eventually we just kind of started to walk away. And he started following in our direction. I didn't feel concerned at all, and neither did the other girls. He just was kind of heading in the direction we were heading. But he said several times, "Don't pretend like you don't see me. Don't pretend like you don't hear me." So we kept going, and eventually he stopped, and a man walked by, past this gentleman, and he said the same thing. "I haven't had anything to eat today. Could I have $1?" So the man got out his wallet and handed him $1. And I remember the four of us girls turning, and like one said, "Ooh, let's watch and see what he does," right? We are 17-year-old girls. And somebody said, "Oh, I bet he's going to buy alcohol. He's got $1." But we had all these nefarious things in our head of what he's going to do with this $1. And so we had to see what he was going to do with this $1. And so he walked up to the hot dog vendor and he bought a hot dog. And it was literally the most profound moment of my young life, especially coming from a very small town, and I hadn't experienced people being homeless, and that was quite prevalent in both cities. And I remember just thinking how easy it was for me to pretend like I didn't see him, right? For me to pretend like I didn't hear his words. And so that was my moment. And I decided as a senior I wanted to be a social worker, so I went to undergrad in Minnesota, and I came to Madison to go to social work grad school, and I wanted to do my internship where they did homeless services. So I remember, and I have to share this super quick story, I drove my car and I parked in front of Grace Episcopal Church, like many of you did when you came in with the meals, right? And I'd never seen a meter before where you put the quarters in. And it said 25 minutes. Well, I knew my interview for, doing my internship at the shelter was going to be, 15 minutes, was going to be longer than 15 minutes, and that was a quarter. So I stood there and I put like $2 worth of quarters in there, right? Because I needed to be there more than 15 minutes. So sure enough, I was in there for an hour, yay. They said I could do my internship there, and I came out and I had a ticket. So it was like, welcome to Madison. But that didn't deter me. So that was just, kind of my journey. And I celebrated last May, my 30 years with Porch Light. I've been the executive director for 5 years. And I tell my children it's the only grown-up job that I've ever had. And I have, my oldest is a senior or a sophomore at lacrosse, and I have a senior in high school, 2 boys, and then my little girl is a freshman in high school. So I said, that's not normal. Most people don't go to college for what they did for the rest of their lives, and most people aren't at one job for 30 years, so don't panic. So I just want to share some of the many things that we do at Porch Light. I know you are all very familiar with the men's shelter. And what kind of a historic day today, as several people commented that they saw me on the news this evening, that the mayor made the announcement that, I think she commented that after 2 years of the pandemic, but I say after 2 years plus 35 years, we have finally have a permanent site that we will build a permanent location for the men's shelter, that we can build something from the ground up. It's truly just, a piece of land, which will be way better than just a warehouse that they renovate, right? We'll literally be able to say, this is what we need there. The men will be able to say, this is what we need there. So it's wonderful that I was excited to be here tonight, to be with people who have shared in that ministry with us at Grace Episcopal and can help celebrate that we have come a long way. I mean, I know we're now starting with that journey, but it'll be a wonderful, wonderful journey. When the pandemic hit, literally almost to the days, right, 2 years ago, it became very clear immediately that we could not stay in the basement of Grace Episcopal, St. John's, and First United Methodist, which was the 3 churches that we kind of shuffled people back and forth to for many, many years. So we were on daily phone calls and then Zooms with the city, the county, public health. It was middle of March. We still were serving 145 people. They were queuing in line, inches apart, sleeping on mats on the floor, inches apart. I mean, we couldn't properly clean. They couldn't properly distance. I mean, there was nothing about it was good. And so within 2 weeks, we were out at Warner Park, and we were out there probably for about 7 months, and then it just wasn't large enough for our winter needs and numbers that we would get up to. And then we moved to the First Street Garage, which I call the First Street Shelter, which is at Johnson and First Street. We've been there now for over a year, and we will get to be there, I believe the mayor said, through the summer. So in September, we will be moving to the Zaire Road location temporarily, which is the old Savers Gander Mountain building there in front of the mall. But she said like 3 years, so it's hard to feel like temporary is 3 years, but if we did 35, we can do 3. We're just ready to be settled. We feel like we've got the one back, and we haven't quite settled into a place yet, but we will be settled. So we will move all of our goodies over to Zaire Road, get set up there for the next 3 years. Even just with having this large space at First Street, which is just a huge footprint, we have been able to do so much more. So to finally be at a permanent spot is just thrilling. One of the first things that we did, besides move, when the pandemic hit, was to lift the yearly limit. So forever, both the men's shelter and the Salvation Army and the Salvation Army Family Shelter and the Salvation Army Single Women's Shelter, they received 90 nights in the year, with weather exceptions. When it's the horrible weather, you can stay longer. But in the end, it was still a time limit. And so we lifted that 2 years ago, and that has gone great. And so our goal is that we would keep that, right? We would keep that lift so that anybody who identifies as male could come there every night if they needed that until they were permanently housed. We were also able to, at Grace Church, it literally was, we had 3 night managers. One who was in the basement at Grace Church with those 125 people, and then one who walked over to St. John's with all of them, and one who walked over to First United Methodist. I mean, it wasn't a team. They barely knew each other because they each worked at a different location. And so these past 2 years, we have been literally, from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., we have a team of people that are able to work with folks in the shelter We have cots for 250. The most we've had is 187, which was about a month ago and was an all-time high. Like, that is higher than our high we ever had at Grace Church. Which I still think, it's a, I wouldn't say it's a number to celebrate, but I'm very thankful that all of those people who came in chose to come off the streets, right? They weren't leaving housing to move into our shelter. They were coming from the streets to get out of the cold, and we had the space to still socially distance. All the cots are 6 feet apart. We have for 2 years now done COVID health screenings for every man who comes through the door. They have temperature checks. We ask them 11 questions. They have them memorized and literally recite them to us and then say yes or no. We have a room kind of, so right when you walk into the shelter, they have security screening, and then we have the health screening. And so anybody who presents with symptoms or a temperature would immediately go to this back office area where we have partnered with a nursing program called Nurse Disrupted. And so sitting in the comfort of their home is a nurse whose job is to assess symptoms and triage them. Are they, and just COVID, and is it bad enough that they need to go to the emergency room? Do they appear to be symptomatic that they just need to be quarantined in a hotel? So then we would send them via cab to one of the county's medical respite hotels. Or maybe they just have a bad cough because they're a smoker or something. Well, then they go back into the shelter. So that has been happening for 2 years, that the county has a few different types of hotels. Medical respite hotels, where anybody who is contact traced as being around somebody who was positive for COVID, and folks who are positive for COVID. They have vaccinations set up, they have meals, they have testing. We do all of that at the shelter too. We have weekly vaccinations, we have weekly testing. We have had one very bad outbreak last Thanksgiving, which, we kind of went a whole year and a half, and then, out of the blue, Omicron got us. But we were thankful. We had a place to send folks, right? We knew public health was taking care of them once they got to the hotels. I would say today there's probably 9 people in these medical respite hotels. At Thanksgiving there was about 130. So it was a pretty large outbreak amongst the homeless population. The other group that is in hotels, and that's still about 150 people, immediately when the pandemic hit, we identified men and women who were at very high risk. So they were either through their age or the fact that they had serious physical health issues. And so literally the public health was just like, anybody who has these physical health issues, they need to be in these vulnerable hotels, we call them. Both of those things have all been paid for through CARES Act funds. They will both end this summer. The medical respite hotel is ending at the end of June, and I'm not sure about the vulnerability hotel, but it will end this summer. And so, many of those folks will be homeless, right, when they leave, and so we are expecting and hoping that if they're still in need of shelter, that the men will come to our shelter, and so we may be filling up, even more of those beds. Though many groups, including Porch, have been working to house them first, right, so they don't go from being in a hotel for 2 years and then having to be homeless. We have housed several of them, and they have case managers who are working with them, but they can't, everybody's not getting housed. So that is what's going on with the shelter. One kind of cool, exciting thing that's going to be starting April 1st through the same Nurse Disrupted program. They are out fundraising, plus we were able to get some funds through the city to kind of do a pilot project. What the nurses found was when the men who are symptomatic, come into the room and are sitting on the tablet and there's the nurse, they're asking about their frostbite. They're asking about this horrible pain in his leg, this awful rash that they have, this eye infection, right? They have physical health symptoms, but the nurse's response is, I can only talk to you about your COVID symptoms. And so starting April 1st, Nurse Disrupted is going to be partnering with another nurse-led organization, and they are going to be hiring them $25 per consultation. And right now we have funds to go through June to, kind of like the pilot project, like, do the men feel comfortable doing this? Are there enough physical health reasons why they would choose to do that? With an end goal of, is this something they would go to an emergency department for, right? Where they really didn't need to. So Nurse Disrupted is really hoping that hospitals and acute care clinics, would want to invest in this program, that they could maybe be diverting people from ending up just going to an emergency room with something that could be simply treated through telehealth, which we've all been using, right, for the past 2 years. So we're super excited about that. Some other things that we want to do once we get to this permanent site, now that we have all this telehealth set up, mental health, right? 50% of the men that I serve at the men's shelter have severe mental health issues, many of which are not, willing to get in a case manager's car and go drive to, a psychiatrist, but would they willing to be at the shelter, go in this, have supper, go in this back room with a volunteer that they trust or a case manager that they trust and talk to, some psychiatric services, counseling services, telehealth-wise. So we're going to be looking into that. There's an unmet need in our community for couples. There is not shelter for couples. And so that big, large group of folks who were sleeping out at Rhinedale Park, the city had case managers go out there, or outreach workers go out there and survey them and ask, why are you here, right? Women, why aren't you at the Salvation Army? Men, why aren't you sleeping at Porch Shelter? And the three big reasons were, we are a part of a couple, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm not leaving my wife and sending her somewhere away, or my girlfriend or my partner. I have a dog, and I will sleep in this tent before I ever give up this dog. I'm a cat person, so I only partially get that. I know you dog people get it. And the third one is rules, right? Even though we have immensely lessened our rules at the shelter to get more people to come in, and because we have more space, we have, so imagine this, twice deep, full of 175 cots, right? Like, it's a MASH, big gymnasium full of cots. We have a separate area that we call the recovery room for people who are intoxicated or experiencing mental health symptoms. So we can accommodate some behaviors that we just couldn't at Grace Church, because you're standing inches from each other, and when you stand inches from each other and you're having trouble starts, right? And so, but we can't eliminate all of the rules. You can't just sit on your cot and drink or whatever rule you want to break. We do have some rules. And so I would love it if we could, through our new site, could we somehow accommodate couples? Have a smaller portion separated from the men that was for couples. Something they do in Minneapolis and St. Paul is that their big shelter, they have what's called pay to stay, and that is for, at their men's shelter, it's for the men who are working. I would say about 30% of the men who come to our shelter have jobs, and so if that's a first shift job, that's fine. Intake is between 5 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. But if you have a second shift job or a third shift job, you obviously can still come to the shelter. We just need to know your schedule and verify that you're working. But yeah, you're showing up at 2 in the morning. We have some people who come and all they do is grab breakfast before we have to shoosh them out the door because we're closing. So with this pay to stay, the facilities in Minneapolis and St. Paul are 24-hour shelters, so easier to accommodate, but they allow the men who are working to be there during the day. They pay $7 a week, and the funds are kept for them for first month's rent and security deposit. So it's not housing. We expect you to work with the case managers and be up and out in 2-3 months when you've saved up enough money. But then you could accommodate those folks who are working second and third shifts. Like right now, I mean, there's no place to sleep at the Beacon, right? So you're literally just trying to get comfortable in a chair and do the best that you can. Though that's our goal for people, right? For the ones who are able to work, is for them to get a job. So I'm hoping in our permanent site, we can accommodate that and figure that out. The other thing that this community has been trying to figure out is lockers. We've been talking about lockers for homeless people with all of their stuff in their duffel bags for 15 years. And nobody's figured it out. So when we went last week to the Zaire Road location, knowing now that we're going to be there for 3 years, the city said, Karla, what about lockers? And I just said, it's number one on my list. Let's figure this out, right? And so I, talked to somebody who's got interns, and I just said, I don't have time to research this. I want wide lockers to fit a big duffel bag, not like school lockers, long and skinny, and I want to stack them. I said, find me that, and then tell me about it. So we have some leftover funds, CARES Act funds, funneled through the city that we have to either spend or give back by June 30th. And so though we will still be at our current location, my feeling is whatever I need for this temporary site or the permanent site, I want to buy it now, right? I want 35 sturdy tables and chairs for meals so they don't have to eat while sitting on their cot, which is what they do now. I want to buy these lockers. I'm just spending the federal money because I don't want to lose it, and all this stuff is going to cost a lot of money, and so I'm excited about that, and we can just store it at Zaire Road until we get there. So we're going to be able to solve this locker problem, things you can do when you have the space to do it. So we're super excited about that. Tiny shelters. When the city closed down Rindell Park, which needed to be closed down, they kind of split the people in half. Half went to the Dairy Drive site that the city also owned, and they put together these little shelters. It's temporary, it's not permanent housing. They're there at no cost. There's case management there. There's 24-hour property management and security, and there's mental health services. There's 35 of those. If 2 years ago, if you'd have told me we had tiny houses and little shelters and people in hotels and permanent housing, I would have just said, what are you people doing, right? Let's just house these people, provide some services. Why are we doing all of this? But I'm now older and wiser, 2 years later, and I agree that not everybody can be housed the same, right? Like, there are men who will sleep outside when it's 20 below zero, and I cannot get into the shelter for all the trying in the world, right? And so if he'll go into a hotel room, or if he'll go into a tiny house or a tiny shelter, and maybe I don't think, that him sitting in there and drinking his life away is the greatest life, he's alive, and we have an opportunity to change that for the better, to provide him some services, to, form a relationship and a friendship with him. So part of the deal with all of these different ways that we're doing housing is all of that money is CARES Act money. And all that, so we bought this stuff, right? It is all ending and not being replenished. So that is a concern. The one thing they are not talking about with the new wonderful men's shelter site is the operating cost. Not one person besides me and Porch are saying, who's going to pay for this, right? So for 35 years, so if we blink, it's 2 years ago, it was $400,000 to run the men's shelter. 2 years later, it is $2.3 million to run the men's shelter. And that is because I no longer have my wonderful volunteers serving food. It's all catered, supper and breakfast. That's about $800,000 a year. I no longer have a formerly homeless person who lives in Porch housing, who cleans the facility, and while he's cleaning the facility, he cleans the the blankets in our donated washer and dryer. I have a professional company who comes and cleans and sanitizes this huge building, and a professional grade, like a hospital grade laundry service, linen service, that comes and gives us blankets, every other day. Security, we've never had security before at the drop-in shelter. When we went out to Warner Park, the alders wanted us to have security, and I said, fine, you're gonna pay for it, go ahead. And it just wasn't necessary, but it's not necessary until it's needed, right? And so then we move into First Street, and we are there for 3 months, and we have that gun violence incident. And then the question was, well, why didn't you have security? Well, so now I will have later. But the only good thing about it is the men really like it, right? As opposed to just the opposite, that they'd be like, why are you wanding me, and why are you looking through my stuff? They live through that trauma of violence out on the streets, right? And so they can come in and know that this is a safe place. And so we have gotten zero resistance from the men through that, even though it takes time, right, to do all of that stuff. So that I will keep you all posted in through my emails that Greg is included on, all of that coming together. It will come together. I'm a faith-filled woman. It will work out. It always worked out. The community is doing a wonderful mission here. So that's, kind of the men's shelter. The largest thing Porchside does is affordable housing. People are most familiar with the shelter, probably because they were a volunteer for many, many years in the shelter. We have 375 units of affordable housing that we own. We do all the property management, we do some of the maintenance, and then we do all of the social work for the folks who live in our housing. We have family housing, we have singles throughout Madison. We have a group home just down the street here, and then we've got some family housing in Sun Prairie. We have built some of that housing. 5 years ago, we built like 28 efficiencies on Thayer Road, kind of on the east side, and then we built a big complex on Nakusa Trail, probably 10 years ago. But otherwise, we've just, bought a house here and bought a house there, and I always say it's kind of like the college students do. 5 men moved in, and they rent a room and share the rest of the house. We keep all of our rents very affordable. In the community, in housing, you have to make 3 times the rent. In Porchlight housing, you have to make 2 times the rent. So, for example, where my offices are on Brook Street, above my head is 300 units of housing. 100 units of housing. That's an old Y. And so it's just like a dorm. They have their own room, which locks, and some basic furnitures, and then, there's a big kitchen on the floor and bathrooms, and we have laundry. The rent there is $260, depending on the size of the room. Tiny or small are your 2 choices. They're $265 to $310, so very affordable. And so they would just need to make twice that. And so we keep it really that affordable because most of the people who live there are elderly, are disabled. We have several folks in wheelchairs, it's men and women. And we have a big elevator that runs up to the 4th floor. And so, by the time you pay for your own food, and everybody, you have to have a cell phone to live, right? By the time you pay some of these other expenses, even paying $300 out of your $750 check is a nice chunk. Some of our family units, we have 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms, kind of scattered throughout. 90% of our housing is permanent housing. We have quite a bit of housing for veterans. We have a complex on Spring Street in Mills, just down from Brook Street, for 24 veterans, and that is a partnership with the VA hospital where they send us folks, and then we house them and provide them services. That is transitional, meaning they can stay there for 2 years, and that's just, that's just how the VA wants it, so that's how it is. But many of them move out and move into our 1-bedrooms or our efficiencies, or move into the community. We serve lots of folks with disabilities, lots of folks with mental health issues, alcohol and drug issues. But we do have some housing that's you just need to be low income. We have folks who don't need a lot of case management. We have folks who need daily case management. You know, we pretty much just let them kind of figure out what their needs are. All of the services are optional. It's not a requirement of living in our housing, but I strongly believe that if you work on developing a relationship, you know, who doesn't want a friend to come and visit and maybe bring you a blanket or something? And so we have very few people who don't want to participate in case management. It's very helpful. I think many of you are probably familiar with our Porch Products program, which is our employment and training program for formerly homeless folks who have disabilities. We have our big, beautiful kitchen that we built probably almost 5 years ago now on Thayer Road, and we train folks on how to make food products, canning, 12 different products that we make. We buy all of our produce from local farmers. You can buy the stuff in grocery stores, in area restaurants. But it's just a wonderful program that, you know, the majority of people that we serve through that program have either never had jobs before or haven't had jobs in many, many years. We probably hire about 20 different people a year. We have one main canner, Patrick. He came from our VA program. We prioritize our formerly homeless veterans, and he's the only person who works full-time, and that's what he does all day is can, like your grandmother did. He cans all the jams and dilly beans. But other people work as much as they can work, right? It could be 15 hours a week. We have one gentleman who works 4 hours a week. They learn all the skills of, you know, working in a kitchen, but also the soft skills, right? Like you need to show up showered and have clean clothes on, be ready to work, you know, but if you're late or you don't call us in 3 days, you're not fired. You know, we call your case management and say, we're concerned about Johnny, please check in on him, and then you're welcomed back. The last two people that we hired in the program, I always like to say, you know, what did you do before this? And they both said panhandle on State Street. And so I strongly believe anybody can benefit from the power of work, right? To have, even the people who work 4 hours a week, they know that we're counting on them. We know that we expect them to show up and to put in a good day's work. Once the pandemic is truly behind us, we'll get back to sampling in the grocery stores. Our goal is to sample in every grocery store that we're in once a week, and that's all to participants in the program. If you've ever seen our samplers, we had a real robust program going. Of course, as soon as the pandemic hit, you know, you can't be in the store sampling food. So we will be starting up, as soon as we get the green light, we will be starting up that again. And our last two programs is Safe Haven, which isn't that far from here, on Nakusa Trail over by Walmart and the old Cub Foods. That is a day resource center for homeless folks who have severe and persistent mental health issues. So they can come 7 days a week. We do have 3 meals a day, laundry and social services. They can get their mail there. They can use the phone. It's a very nice complement to the Beacon, who's full of a lot of people, and it's not a great setup for somebody with severe mental health issues. And so we actually have a staff person who goes to the Beacon once a week and kind of talks to their staff and just say, hey, who do you want us to kind of mingle with who might benefit from being at our much smaller program? We get about 40 people a day to their 200 people a day. And so that has worked out we literally just then give them a ride. Oh, come check out our program. And then we give them a bus pass and then they start coming to that. We also have, it's the day program, but then we also have 14 apartments on the top, and those are for people when we have, it's permanent, so when we have a vacancy, it's the people who drop in for services, like that's the waiting list. It's those folks, because once they get a room, so they pay $400, and that they come down and receive the exact same services, right? And they don't mind people walking around in their living room because they were that person a month ago, right? So they can have the 3 meals a day and meet with the staff and get all of those same services. So that's been a wonderful program. And then our last program that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but has been going on for 20 years, is our eviction prevention program called DIGS, which does stand for something, and I'm probably one of the only people that knows what it stands for: Dwelling, Intervention, Grants, and Sustenance. So you don't have to memorize that. But that is a wonderful program that provides very small grants, financial grants, to families that live in housing in the community. So it's not families who live in porch-like housing and are, kind of subsidized rent. It's families who have already found housing in a community and are struggling, right? So it could be, we can give a grant, it has to be related to keeping them housed. So obviously it would be rent or utilities, but if they have a job and they took their car, to get to work, and their car broke down, we can pay a mechanic to help with the car repairs. You needed to buy your daughter's medications, but you used that money, to pay rent. We can help with the medications. So the program is run by a gentleman named Hassan, who started the program 20 years ago, and he still is the only staff person. And he's in a free office over at St. John's. They've been amazing, right downtown. He sees about 1,100 different families, so not individuals, households, every year who are in need of some type of assistance. Since the pandemic hit, he does everything by phone call. Before it was you came in and physically did an intake, so the phone call is much more accommodating. He is able to give a financial gift to about 60% of them. Like, that's when the money runs out, right? Like every month they say, this is the amount of money you have to spend. And so of that 1,100, he's able to help about 700 of those households. And so what he does, the United Way pays for him. So I tell people all of the direct assistance, all of the funds that are donated to the program is all direct assistance, right? Because I have no overhead. United Way pays for him. St. John lets us have phone for free. And so we get funds from Downtown Rotary, FEMA, and faith communities, especially downtown churches get a lot of homeless folks who just walk right into the church, and I'm sure you guys even out here get to experience that, or they call. And so literally for 20 years, they have given us a monthly check or an annual check. And then they will say to folks who come in, I'm sorry, we don't do that here, but you can contact Hassan, here's his card, and he will assist you through that program. So that has been very helpful because he's able to verify, do they even have a car? He can call the landlord, will you let them stay longer? We're working this out. He knows all of the landlords and utility companies, and he calls it putting together a package. So one of the cool things of the program is the family has to match the amount that they receive. And everything all goes to the third party, right? It goes to the landlord, the utility company. So if we're able to give them a $250 grant to help with their rent, they need to match that for $250. And it's very important. It's very important that they be invested in staying housed, right? So it's not one time and you're done, right? The families that we work with are in crises a lot. And so there is a yearly limit and a lifetime limit. But, we helped Brenda with $300 with her rent one year. The next year she comes back and she needs $200 with her utilities. Great. If that helped keep her housed, for another 18 months, that's worth our $200. So then what we do, right, United Way and the other funders want to know, are we just giving a Band-Aid and then the landlord's going to kick them out anyway? What are the outcomes of this program? And so what he does is at 6 months and 12 months after somebody receives a financial gift, he contacts the landlord and asks one question: are they still housed? Because that's it, right? We didn't provide them case management. We didn't provide any other wraparound type services. Our only goal of the program is to keep them in that housing and their children. And so historically, through the 20 years, at the 6-month mark, 85% of the families are still housed. And at the 12-month mark, 75% of the families are still housed. And why those numbers are amazing is because in order to qualify for the program, you have to have an eviction notice. So that's one of the first things that he says is, because some people are just like, well, I don't want to get behind, I'm kind of struggling. Well, has your landlord given you an eviction notice? No, they're just trying to be a responsible person, right? Well, we needed to help twice that many people if we just helped everybody who thought they were getting behind. So they truly have to have an eviction notice, a 14-day notice, a 30-day notice, or a 5-day notice from their landlord. And then we have the landlord sign something that says, we're going to give you this X amount of money, and you agree not to evict them for 30 days. So it hasn't really bought them anything other than 30 more days. But what we have found is by just helping them out for a small sum of money for a period of time in their life where they were in crisis, helps the majority of them keep going at least for a couple more years when they might need a little bit more. So that's just one of my favorite programs because it just seems like such a simple concept, right? Offer just a little bit of something when they need it and let them know that you're there. That's easy enough. So those are the 5 programs that we do at Porch Light. This is what keeps me busy day in and day out. So like I said, like kids said, I can blab forever about it, but I want to take a minute to see if there are any questions you guys have. You've been so wonderful and attentive. Yeah?
Karla, is there something that our church can do? I mean, we were serving meals. Is there something that, besides monetary assistance, is there something we can do? We're kind of a hands-on group.
Sure.
That we can do to help out at the new facilities?
Yes. I was going to say yes and then list all this stuff, and then when you said the new facility, you threw me.
Any of the facilities.
Yes. So Jessica, remember that name? She's our only Jessica. She is one of those, ladies who does everything, but one of the things that she does is work with our wonderful volunteers. She did work with the wonderful shelter volunteers because Steve Schooler already did, and when he passed the hat on to me, he's just like, now you're in charge of these wonderful volunteers. And that was a blessing because I got to work with all of you. But Jessica works with the 1,000 other volunteers that do so much at Porch Light. So she has, volunteer opportunities for one person, for groups, one time, over and over. We have groups, because we have all of this housing, we have groups that clean out our apartments, we have groups that paint, we have groups that do landscaping, we have volunteers who work in our front office. We understand the value of a wonderful volunteer. If a group of people wanted to do something, especially with spring and summer coming, there's opportunities to do stuff outside if people feel a little more comfortable with that, opportunities to do stuff inside. I still have wonderful volunteer groups. Literally after today when I sent out the notice saying, yay, permanent new site, I had a gentleman, he runs Blow and Smoke Barbecue. And I thought after all these years, bless him, I should go and eat barbecue at Blow and Smoke Barbecue and bring my family. But I haven't yet. Anyway, so that's what he did. Every month would bring barbecue from his restaurant and serve the men. And so he literally, and I've never emailed back and forth with him. Well, he gets my emails, right? But he's never responded back. And one line he's just like, when can I get back in there and feed the men? Bless all of you. So the answer is not yet, but someday hopefully. It's just like, I don't know that Zaire Road, they're not putting in a kitchen. They don't, because it's going to be temporary, even though we're going to be there for 3 years, they don't want to invest a lot of money into something where we won't be permanently, right? So in the new facility, I want a beautiful commercial kitchen. Y'all could come and cook it right there if you want to, or the groups who aren't faith communities and don't have church basements could come and just cook it right there if they wanted to. And you'll have all this, set up like you did at Grace. Like right now, certainly not at First Street. I don't even have a sink. But yeah, at Zaire Road, they don't plan on putting anything like a dishwasher or a sink, anything like that. But yet they're the first to say, can you cut down the food budget? Well, if you could give me some accommodations so I could get my volunteers back in here, yes, we can work together. But again, it's 3 years. Who knows what could happen? We could do something. And even if, unfortunately, so we had 70 groups that served supper and breakfast 365 days a year. Like, it still just amazes me how fabulous that was. Many have retired. Many, it was, an older population that did it, and they just said, this just seems like a good time for us to retire. So at one time I emailed out and said, if I could get you back in, how many of you are still in? And out of the 70, about 15 groups got back to me. So I think in a perfect world, once we're all set up and I have accommodations for food and bringing in food, that the volunteer meals would supplement something, right? Like either I would have a commercial kitchen where I could hire a chef, and then I would say 15 nights a week or a month, I'm having volunteer groups. You're not working. They'll come in, serve, and clean up your kitchen and be gone. You won't even know they're there. Because for many, like you, this was the mission of your church, right? This was your hands and feet of doing the Lord's work. And so, and of course, the men still talk about the church ladies make the best food. Sorry for all you men who served, but it was the church ladies. So yeah, even a catered meal is not a good church plate of food. So they do miss you very much. So I will keep everybody up to date on that and know that we would love to get you back in there. But yes, there are other volunteer things, and maybe, I don't know what needs to happen with Zaire Road. Maybe it needs to be painted. I don't know, maybe there are volunteer stuff that could happen there. Maybe there'll be something with the locker program. Yes, definitely keep in touch with us.
Do they have any need for knitted items like blankets and mittens and hats?
No, maybe the blankets, not like when I need hats and gloves for men, I need something that's really they're just outside in the wet and snow, right? Like I really need something that's more like a store-bought glove, because they're pretty sopping wet by the time they come to us. But maybe the blankets, you could keep in touch with me with that. So for anybody who's on Facebook, I'm always putting something on Facebook. They always need personal hygiene items. If anybody's doing the hotels, whatever, we always need the little stuff because people stopped traveling, right? For 2 years, businessmen and women didn't stay in hotels. And so Jessica's just like, Karla, we have like 1 month's left worth of little personal hygiene items. And I was just like, what do you mean? We've got years of that stuff. She said, no, you had years before the pandemic. Nobody's traveling. So we always need those things. We don't need socks anymore. We partnered with Bombas, who they do the commercials. You buy a sock, we donate a sock. It's true. We get 1,500 socks a year from Bombas, and they're good socks. And stand up to our Wisconsin winters. So that's been a blessing. But anyway, on Facebook, I always put, this is what our need of the day is. Coffee grounds, something. Yeah.
So is the new facility going to be a 24-hour place?
That is what the mayor wants. That is what the mayor wants. We are fine with that. We have been meeting probably for the past year on a monthly basis with the Beacon. I don't know that Porchlight's interested in getting back into we ran the Hospitality House Day Center for 25 years before the Beacon. I don't think we're any interested in running a day center, but could we partner with somebody who does it very well? They do a great job, and they can be there all day, and we can come and do the night. I don't think that's going to happen at Zaire Road because that's, right now, they can't come up with how to pay for the shelter, let alone having us be there for 24 hours. You know, I did say we certainly could stay open on inclement weather days or when it's 95 degrees, right? I mean, obviously, someone's going to have to come up with funds for that, but that is an easy solution, as opposed to trying to, you know, get somebody to the beacon in treacherous weather. Yes, the mayor wants that very much. So I would say that would be, now that we have a permanent site location, I would say she will be talking about that. She did not bring that up at the press conference. The other little side scuttle is that, so the county purchased the beacon site, right, and renovated that. So they don't want to, even though they're bursting out of there, they're just like, well, we just bought a place and renovated. So now what do we do? So now you're going to, because you wouldn't have the beacon plus us be a 24-hour shelter, right? There's no funds for that. And so they need to work that out. Either way, you know, we want to run a men's shelter. If they want us to do it 24 hours, we'll do it 24 hours. Other questions? Yeah, Greg.
I seem to recall that on a couple of occasions with the men's shelters, we've gotten to a threshold of acquiring them, and then at the last minute, the deal would fall through or something would happen. Are there any more approvals that have to happen with this deal, or is this solid, or?
That's a great question that nobody really asked. I had two questions I wanted to ask at the press conference, but I didn't want it to come from me. So I wish I would have secretly given a stranger a note and said, ask these two questions. So twice I asked somebody that, and so the first time I asked the lead person with the city who was out there looking for these places before I knew the location, and I said, he said, you know, sometime in March, we're going to be making the announcement. And I said, oh, great, is this just going to go through all the levels and the neighbors and the council, and then it's going to fall apart, I'm going to be sad and disappointed? And he said, no, I don't think so. And so I'm just like, well, how could he possibly say that? And so then I thought, well, maybe he can say that because they already own the place. That's got to eliminate, the first place that they found, as soon as the neighbors found out it was going to be a homeless shelter, the local business just bought it, right? So obviously that can't happen because the city owns it. So I was talking with, there was a city council person who's on our board of directors, and so I was talking to her today, and I just said, same thing, obviously it has to go through the layers. Can this fall apart? And she said, no. And I said, well, what do you mean no? Can't the neighbors just have a fit? And she said, well, I don't think there's, I don't think that this is a location where the neighbors will have a fit. She's like, what does that mean? That didn't really answer my question. So really, Greg, I don't know. They all seem to not think so. I mean, there might not be a residential neighborhood, but there's certainly businesses all over the place. So we'll just win them over. Other questions? I think that's it. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here.
Is this me? Okay. Take my life that I may be.
that's it. Thank you very much, and especially thank you, Karla. We applaud you and all the other folks at Porch Life for all you do. Thank you very much.